I just know something bad is going to happen.
He basically pins her to a wall against her will.
He growled, and the sound trembled down my neck.
And she repeatedly says, both verbally and with her actions,
along my breasts until they ached.
No, please let me go.
His nostril flared until he scented me.
He still pins her.
He had me dance until I was sick.
And then marks her by biting her neck.
I became Rysand's plaything.
I read this book when I was 17, and rereading it brings me guttural shame to have ever loved it.
It never happened. It never happened. We made this one up. It's fiction.
And I'm not the only one.
This is it. This is the stupidest book I have ever read. I'm a second away from dousing myself in gasoline and lighting myself on fire, just so I never have to look at this book again. My favorite line of this book sums up my reading experience. My bowels turned watery. I couldn't help it.
But then again, the book has sold over 13 million copies, and it is widely loved by a lot of people. Here's my opinion! The book begins with our central protagonist, Farah, hidden deep in the shadows of a forest, with a crossbow pointed towards a doe. When she realizes she's not alone. A few feet away, what seems to be a wolf, too, has his canines aimed towards the doe. It is in this moment that Farah has to contend with going empty-handed to a cottage on a growling stomach, where her sisters and her father await her arrival, practically starving to death, or killing the wolf and taking the doe home.
If you were a Disney princess, who would you be?
Cinderella, cause she broke, homie. She represent me, yo. Let me borrow $20.
In desperation, Farah kills the wolf, which is definitely not going to haunt her later on in the book, right? Right? A giant beast breaks into the cottage where Farah and her family lives and demands to know who murdered the wolf. Turns out it wasn't a wolf at all, but instead a fairy. Creatures who are 1,000 tons more lethal than humans and had once mercilessly ruled over them.
I read about did you say want to a 10-year-old with Down syndrome?
For the price of taking the life of a fairy, Farah has to live in the fairy world, frightened for the rest of her life and never return.
Stay jealous, babe. Stay jealous, honey. Jealousy is a disease. Remember that, Diamond?
At Brighton, the beast transforms into a golden-haired figure in the shape of a human and serves Farah, who is faint with hunger, some food, informing her that as long as she stays in the manor, her family will be cared and provided for, and that is when... After weeks of skirting around their feelings for each other, their growing attraction reaches a crescendo on Kalenai night, and that is where it gets really weird. Tonight, Tam will allow great and terrible magic to enter his body, Lucien said, staring at the distant fires. The magic will seize control of his mind, his body, his soul, and turn him into the hunter. It will fill him with his sole purpose, to find the maiden. From their coupling, magic will be released and spread to the earth, where it will regenerate life for the year to come. And that is when... Farah is told to stay away, and what does she do? The exact opposite. She goes out of her room towards the kitchen, and that is where Tamlin, who because of the magic is not the usual Tamlin anymore, but instead a feral beast, corners her. Going somewhere, Tamlin asked, I was about to pass him when he grabbed me so fast that I didn't see anything until he had me pinned against the wall. I smelled you. I searched for you and you weren't there. Let go, I said as evenly as I could, but his claws punched out, embedding in the wood above my hands. Still riding the magic, he was half wild. You drove me mad, he growled, and the sound trembled down my neck along my breasts until they ached.
What the fuck?
I searched for you, and you weren't there. When I didn't find you, he said, bringing his face closer to mine until we shared breath. It made me pick another. I couldn't escape. I wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to. He grabbed my hands again and bit my neck. I cried out as his teeth clamped onto the tender spot where my neck met my shoulder. Don't ever disobey me again.
Excuse me? You're biting my butt!
All jokes aside, in this moment you're not entirely sure if Farah is complicit in what is taking place, and Tamlin's behavior is excused under the guise of him being influenced by powerful magic, which brings me to this question. Why did this behavior need to take place in the first place if the writer had to concoct an excuse for it to occur? Is it absolutely necessary for a man to behave in a violent, aggressive way that is clearly written in a romantic manner? So that's just what the book is. A girl is forced to live in a manner wherein she's lied to about why she's there, manipulated, belittled, coaxed, until she catches a strong dose of Stockholm Syndrome and falls in love with her captor. But to anyone who has read the entire series, you could say that Farah doesn't end up with Tamlin, so the writer must not condone this behavior. But Rysand is no better, if not worse, than Tamlin. He, just like Tamlin, binds her to a bargain so that he owns her for 1 week for the rest of her life, dresses her like a prostitute, drugs her, and then forces her to dance with him for the mockery of the entire court. And yet again, just as it was with Tamlin, this behavior is excused because he doesn't want to do this to Farah. He has to. He has his reasons. And yet again, why did this pernicious behavior need to take place if the writer had to find a reason to make it justifiable when it is not so under any circumstance? But Tamlin and Rysand are not the only men in literature who have behaved insensibly. Take Darcy in the revolutionary book Pride and Prejudice, who in a classic manner calls the woman he loves ugly. On a particular night, a man spies a mesmerizing woman across a ballroom and is struck with a dilemma. The woman is beneath him in social stature. She is lowly and inferior by rank by virtue of her poverty, and yet she is frenzied and fervent in a felicitous joy as she laughs, smiles, and dances. Her name is Elizabeth, and he is Mr. Darcy, a man who is in possession of a good fortune and must be thus in want of a wife. But the dilemma his heart rebels against, the quandary his mind is forced to confront, and confront it does, matter over mind be damned. The mind must shove the heart of the horse that gallops impetuously onward towards the seemingly infinite horizons of fate and take the reins into its own sure hands. He cannot possibly marry this woman until the heart cannot take it anymore. In vain I have struggled, it will not do. My feeling will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. But he does not notice the hidden insult he has just bestowed upon the woman he claims he loves. He calls her inferior just because she is poor. So she rejects him outright with incivility, and how could she not? He had insulted her and her family, but he lashes out in anger.
Might I ask why with so little endeavour at civility I am thus repulsed?
And I might as well inquire why, with so evident a design of insulting me, you chose to tell me that you like me against your better judgment.
No, believe me, I
If
didn't
I was uncivil, then that is some excuse, but I have other reasons. You know I have.
What reasons?
Do you think that anything might tempt me to accept a man who has ruined, perhaps forever, the happiness of a most beloved sister? You deny it, Mr. Darcy. That you separated a young couple who loved each other, exposing your friend to the centre of the world for caprice, and my sister to its derision for disappointed hopes, and involving them both in misery of the acutest kind.
I do not deny it.
How could you do it?
Because I believed your sister indifferent to him.
Indifferent?
I watched them most carefully and realised his attachment was deeper than hers.
That's because she's shy.
Bingley too is modest and was persuaded she didn't feel strongly
Because
for him.
you suggested it.
I did it for his own good.
My sister hardly shows her true feelings to me. I suppose you suspect that his fortune had some bearing on the
No, I wouldn't be your
matter.
sister the dishonor, though it was suggested.
What was?
It was made perfectly clear that an advantageous marriage...
Did my sister give that impression?
No, there was, however, I have to admit, the matter of your family.
Our want of connection. Mr. Bingley didn't seem to vex
No, it was
himself
more
about
than
that.
that.
How, sir?
It was the lack of propriety shown by your mother, your 3 younger sisters, even on the occasion of your father. Forgive me. You and your sister I must exclude.
And what about Mr. Wickham?
Mr. Wickham.
What excuse can you give for your behaviour towards him?
You take an eager interest in that gentleman's
He told me of
concerns.
his misfortunes.
Oh, yes, his misfortunes have been very great indeed.
You ruin his chances and yet you treat him with sarcasm.
So this is your opinion of me. Thank you for explaining so fully. Perhaps these offences might have been overlooked had not your pride been hurt by my honesty in admitting scruples about our relationship. Could you expect me to rejoice in the inferiority of your circumstances?
And those are the words of a gentleman. From the first moment I met you, your arrogance and conceit, your selfish disdain for the feelings of others made me realise that you were the last man in the world I could ever be prevailed upon to marry.
Forgive me, madam, for taking up so much of your time.
This is the last blow that severs the head off the ego of Mr. Darcy, and he takes his leave. But then his mind and his heart launched cannons upon each other, upon his breast once more, and this time the mind wins the battle with a few heavy blows of introspection. And Mr. Darcy concludes that he must have been in error in separating Elizabeth's sister from Bingley, since Elizabeth was more aware of her sister's disposition, and that he had indulged in the vice of pernicious pride over the inferiority of Elizabeth's condition. So the next time he is in company of her, his behavior, erroneous in the eyes of Elizabeth, is completely changed to the astonishment of Elizabeth. And he writes a letter in regards to Mr. Wickham. He takes a stand and informs Elizabeth that Mr. Wickham had almost duped his sister to elope with him for her money. Elizabeth, upon reading about Mr. Wickham, is shocked beyond measure and forced to confront her own bias against Mr. Darcy. "How despicably I have acted," she cried. "I, who have prided myself on my discernment." It is not a surprise that Elizabeth finds herself not hating Mr. Darcy. So when she receives a letter that her sister has eloped with Mr. Wickham, she, in a state of mourning, confides and seeks consolation in Mr. Darcy. When Elizabeth reaches home, after days of worry and anxiety, a letter arrives informing the family that Mr. Wickham had agreed to marry Lydia in exchange for an annual income. The family suspects that someone must have paid Mr. Wickham off, and soon it is revealed that someone was Mr. Darcy himself. Mr. Darcy, whom Elizabeth had believed had caused the ruination of her sister. It was Mr. Darcy who had been the salvation for all her sisters. Soon enough, in the absence of Mr. Darcy's disapproval, Bingley proposes to Elizabeth's sister, and they both get married. And this is what separates Darcy in Pride and Prejudice from Tamlin and Rysand in A Coat of Thorns and Roses, wherein both degrade Feyre without apology and are never changed by the end of the novel. And the fault of that partially lies in Feyre, because she never reprimands them for their behavior, never raises a finger against them degrading her, and is an unwilling acquiescent party in their acts. She is akin to a leaf in the wind with no compass of her own to guide her, no anchor to protect her, and no principles with which to draw her boundaries. And Feyre, as a character, exemplifies all of Sarah J. Maas's characters, which is ironic because they stare out through the covers of her books with swords in their hands as if daring the reader, proclaiming, "I bow down to no man," and yet in the content of the book, they don't raise a finger against their degradation. Upon hearing the rumor that Darcy may propose to Elizabeth, Darcy's relatives pay Elizabeth a visit, demanding that she must refuse Darcy in the case of his proposing to her. And Elizabeth, after having seen Darcy prove himself to her, denies irrefutably because now she actually does want to marry him. Elizabeth draws her boundaries and does not let her principles be violated, and Darcy has to comply with these principles, or else he knows that there is the consequence of her refusal. Elizabeth is the exact opposite of Feyre, and the bigger irony is that Elizabeth is a revolutionary character representing a much older, more conservative time during which women had fewer rights in comparison to the current landscape that is represented by a much weaker protagonist. So yeah, I'm embarrassed to have liked this book. I should have read Pride and Prejudice instead.